Hangout on Air is now live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor, our last episode of the season. Here to talk tonight about the Survivor Second Chance, aka Survivor Cambodia, because it wasn't clear which one was the actual title at some points. And this was the finale. So, here to wrap things up. So, lots of crazy stuff happened in the finale. But what do you say? First impressions? What were your general thoughts? Are you frozen?
Didn't hear anything. Am I freezing?
Yeah, maybe you were a little bit, because I was asking, what are your general thoughts? Yeah.
Why is this being like this?
I don't know. Connection difficulties, alas. How's it going?
Let me.
All right.
See.
Technical difficulties.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my phone from the Wi-Fi. See if all this helps.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Just fine so far. Yeah.
Right.
Or you it was like halting a little bit, but not significantly.
But good now?
Yeah, except that I've asked the question 3 times, which is I'm so. The question was general impressions.
I was happy with the outcome.
Okay.
I was rooting for Spencer, but I'll take this. And you know what? The fact that, and Jeremy, this may sound bad, but Jeremy knew what he was doing by keeping his new baby a secret at the very end of Tribal Council.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
like
the thing
just said right there, game, set, match. Like he had it. He won it right there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was leaning in that direction anyway, just given how hostile everybody seems to be towards Spencer. It was always possible that it was one of those things where people are planning to just kind of be extra tough on the person they plan to vote for just so that they seem fair or something, but it seemed pretty biased against Spencer pretty much from the jump when it got to that final Tribal Council. And honestly, I tend to agree. Like, I liked Spencer a lot. I was rooting for him consistently throughout the season. I have to say, by the very end, though, I felt like it seemed clear to me that Jeremy ought to win. As much as I liked Spencer, he kind of fumbled the ball a little bit at the end, and it sort of became clear that there were a few things that had not gone over as successfully as it had initially seemed.
Oh yeah, and he completely misplayed that Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
And he to his credit, he owned up to it, but
it's too late at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he did acknowledge that was the old him, and that's exactly what happened. Like, it stripped him down, and all of the good work he'd been doing, building relationships, which, by the way, the relationships is what even got him into the final 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, the first person that he opened up to, that was his big, like, revelation of talking, and was the person who convinced him to tell his girlfriend that he loved her, and, like, all these things was Jeremy. And that's part of why Jeremy brought him. Yes, he thought he could beat him, but Jeremy also had some integrity to, these are the people I have a relationship with. Mm-hmm. And he never said this because he knew, I feel like he didn't say this because he knew it would be the wrong message to send to this jury, which was, with all your voting block bullshit, the alliance won out. It was still the right move, and here we are. And he kind of hinted at that, but he never said you all misplayed this by doing that voting block stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he needed Spencer there, instead of Wentworth. And the reason why Spencer got that deep into the alliance was because he built that relationship and that trust with Jeremy as a person, not as a Survivor player. So Spencer still had his arc, but then when he got stripped down, he got put against the wall, he lashed out at him and he acted the way that, his arrogance and I could win this game bullshit. Like, it was the wrong way to play it. Jeremy was going to take him either way.
Mm-hmm.
What his play, if he felt like he needed to convince Jeremy, should have been exactly what Jeremy's position was, which is, Jeremy, you should take me because we need to prove that the alliance of 3 is better than the voting blocks. If you take Kelly, you're just going into that method of saying, well, this is what's most advantageous for me right now, so I'm going to vote this way. And you've been against that the whole game. By taking me and Tasha, we prove that the alliance is there. That's what he should have said. And had he said that in camp to him and known that it was good or felt comfortable that he had made his case, he wouldn't have needed to make any case in front of everybody at Tribal. He could have gone in there and Jeff said, you know what, Spencer, what do you got to say? And he said, you know what, I said everything I need to say to Jeremy this afternoon. This is going to go how this is going to go.
Especially since one of the things that we learned subsequently, just in terms of how the vote played out, but also in a post-show interview, is that Jeremy really wasn't even strongly considering bringing Kelly instead of Spencer. It was always something that lots of decisions in the season had been for Jeremy, where it's like, he's certainly willing to be open to being presented alternatives and he will consider them, but it's going to take a substantial amount of persuasion to get him to change his current position. And it rarely ever reached that threshold. And with Kelly, it was not even close. And in fact, one of the things that Kelly said in an interview was that that scene where Jeremy and Kelly were talking in the hammock, it concluded off camera with Jeremy saying, listen, I respect you. I'm just going to let you know I'm not bringing you to the final. So he had told her that he wasn't going to bring her. Now, that's not to say she couldn't have changed his mind at some point, but just especially given that Jeremy really had already kind of made up his mind to keep Spencer, it just made Spencer's kind of meltdown there unnecessary.
Well, knowing that makes Jeremy's play that much more genius. And and I already kind of thought this, and I thought this a couple of times during this episode, since we had like 9 tribal councils this episode.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jeremy did the best, which they never really called attention to, is he never tipped his hand.
Right. Very good at that.
When he had people thinking a couple of different things about him or what he might do, he never tipped it. And this was another example. Now that I know that he told Kelly, it's genius that he didn't tell Spencer that you're good. So he let Spencer blow up, knowing he was going to be fine, sitting there calmly, never being like, dude, just chill, you're coming. All afternoon, he never said that. He let Spencer have that because he knew Spencer was making that case because Kelly had told him what Spencer was running around saying. So he had to know Spencer was going to say something in Tribal. And so he let him be the bad guy. You know, he made Spencer the shield there.
Yeah, well, and that was really ultimately, like, even going back to early in the season, that was Jeremy's whole approach, is essentially having people be kind of his armor, where he's kind of pulling all the strings, but he's having other people, do the dirty work in some ways. And honestly, I think what happened with Spencer is that as much as he did make progress and growth in terms of being able to form these social bonds with people, I think what ended up happening, unfortunately for him, is that he went from being someone who gets voted out earlier into a second place game. Meaning, we've talked about this before, the type of game where you get to the end, but then the jury hates you. And so,
well, yeah, I just want to be clear. I don't think the jury hates him. I think the jury respected how he played and respect that he got there, but they weren't going to vote for him, especially after his meltdown. I truly believe the votes might have been that he might have received some votes if two things hadn't happened. If he hadn't melted down and Jeremy hadn't have put the icing on the cake with his kid.
mm-hmm.
If those two things don't happen, I don't think Spencer wins, but I think Spencer gets votes.
Well, I think he may have gotten votes in that case, especially considering it was a unanimous. So he might have gotten some. But I mean, I think that there were some of the people there in the jury that were mad at him, and it was a reflection of he managed to create the connection, but then broke it, and that produced a betrayal effect that might not have been there if there hadn't been that emotional connection. But of course, he needed the emotional connection in order to get further, but he was not adequately prepared for how to sever that connection without creating these hard feelings.
Right, which is coming back to Jeremy's brilliant play, which is why I'm happy. I totally think he deserved to win,
mm-hmm.
and why it was also important to bring Spencer is the idea of the alliance is part of what shielded Jeremy from this.
Yeah.
Because while he doesn't ever say the words, you know, when someone says, well, you voted me out, well, you weren't part of the alliance. Well, you voted me out. Well, you weren't part of the alliance. Well, I was part of the alliance and you voted me out. Oh, well, Steven, here's my gameplay. You know, you needed to be shielded. You know, I needed to be shielded by Joe. You wanted to get rid of Joe. If Joe went and you're still here, then I become your shield. I don't want that. I want other shields. So you have to go. I'm sorry, but that was my game from the beginning. I did not, again, I didn't go to this voting block, run around, whatever's best for me right now. I played my exact game from start to finish. And if he takes Wentworth to the end, while nobody might necessarily call him on it, it calls into question that he doesn't have that just strong narrative of, hey, that's why you got voted out. That's why you got voted out, and that's why you got voted out. Because then you get to Spencer, and he's like, well, why did I get voted out? Well, it was what was best for me at the time. Yeah. That's not the same story, you know. Even Kim, you're supposed to be in the 4. Why was I supposed to be in the 4? Why'd you get rid of me? Because you friggin' voted for me.
Well, right. Like, see, that was a perfect example, too, where he was able to say, listen, I was the one defending you until you demonstrated unequivocally that I couldn't trust you.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out what had happened. Spencer had to explain to me that you had done exactly what he said you were going to do, and that's why the votes went that way. That's how much I was defending you, is I didn't even understand that it happened.
Yeah, so I think, see, it's just he managed to play this low-key game where he had everybody coming to him with information, and yet he was never the obvious target until a couple of people kind of started figuring it out towards the end, like Kimmy did. Unfortunately, Kimmy wasn't able to make anything happen with that. But the thing is, I think, honestly, I don't know if she would have won, but certainly given how everything played out, if Jeremy brought Kelly to the finals, she would have gotten votes. I think. Yeah. And she would have deserved votes for getting there.
She would have deserved votes. And going back to my argument, it would have put a chink in his narrative.
Yeah.
That would have made it, like, his narrative was so strong, it's not surprising that he got unanimous votes. Because he literally did everything he set out to do and could prove it. And the person who had played the best game that was sitting next to him had just had an emotional meltdown the night before, 2 nights before. like, yeah, that's unanimous. I mean, it's a great setup for him. Whereas Kelly wouldn't have had that meltdown because she didn't. Obviously, we saw how tribal council went, and he wouldn't have had the impeccable narrative. Still a strong narrative, but it wouldn't have been impeccable.
And she has her own narrative that does not include primarily moves that could be flipped around on her as betrayals. See, that was one of the big problems with Spencer, is that when it came down to it, all of the moves that he could take credit for, it, like, once the narrative had shifted, all of a sudden now all of those moves feel like backstabbing and flipping and betraying instead of smart strategic moves. Now, it doesn't change the actual move, but it just, you're looking at it from a different angle now. And it's harder to defend those, whereas Kelly was not in that position of betraying people, because she was always on the, she was clawing from the underside, right? And so there's that impressed narrative of like, wow, look what she managed to do, even though when she was, almost out a number of times.
Right. What happened to Spencer was essentially when, we always talk about this whole thing with the swing vote. He was the swing vote for so long that he managed to, because he was the swing that with Joe for a while that kind of moved the voting blocks around. That's part of what hurt him. And, especially when you sit at the end with Jeremy, who has that narrative, which is honor, strategy, sticking to what you said, playing the way you meant to, which was in opposition to how everyone else was playing. Spencer was just the best at how everybody else was playing, but he wasn't the best at the game because that style of game wasn't right,
Well, one of the things that Kelly also said in her interview just kind of ties into what I was saying about the emotional connection aspect of it, is that it sounds like in his proactive effort to form more of these emotional relationships with people, he overcorrected in the sense of he's considering one of two options, but he ends up making what seem like very personal promises to both sides instead of sort of saying non-committal. So now instead of just like, oh, well, we hoped we could get Spencer, but he stayed with his alliance, we're bummed. But instead of that, it is, he promised that he was with us. And, we had these really deep emotional, conversations where it seemed like he was really vulnerable and opening up, but apparently that was just all bullshit.
Right. Even though it wasn't, it was just
it was
misplaced. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why there might have been more hard feelings, even when what he did from a strategic perspective was not necessarily bad or even like the wrong move. But it sounds like, again, it's kind of like he said in the final tribal council, is that there were times maybe where he was making the right move, but the execution was just off enough that it left kind of some jagged edges instead of a clean break.
Yep.
And that ultimately, those accumulated enough to hurt him. And honestly, too, that final four thing, I mean, because it wasn't just a meltdown that reveals weakness or something like that. It was explicitly I can control the whole jury if you put me over there. I'll make sure that it all happens the way I want. And everyone over there on the jury sitting there going, what? He thinks he can just come over here and he's going to tell us who to vote for?
Yeah.
It was I mean, we understand where it would come from in the moment, but certainly from a third party perspective, you kind of see him saying stuff like that and go, yikes, that's maybe not the best way to put that.
Oh God, I mean, my fiance Abby was watching with me, and she doesn't watch a lot of Survivor. She sits down and watches episodes here and there. She understands how it works, and she's familiar with Spencer because he's been on for a couple of seasons, so she's seen enough episodes of him. And so we were watching the finale last night, and he has that meltdown, and she kind of looks over at me and she goes, okay, I don't know how this works exactly, but that seems like that's going to hurt him in getting votes later, right? And I was like, yeah. So it was so overt that like people who don't watch Survivor were like, yeah, I wouldn't vote for that guy. Like, that's that's uncomfortable and arrogant and weird.
Well, and it just
totally awkward. Yeah.
It suddenly reeked of desperation and panic, which it was exactly what it was. But it just suddenly, all of a sudden, you're at that final tribal council, and you're that being the last time you saw him, and you're just sort of feeling like, so after we just saw that, he's going to come in and try to claim confidence about the way he played.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that,
Yeah.
That's one of those things where it's like, that's why I said the best way he could have played is he had to play it cool.
Yeah.
And just accept that if his argument didn't work once, making it multiple times, like he needed to understand how Jeremy works.
Mm-hmm.
Which is you make a reasonable argument to him, he processes it, he makes a decision. Like, he's not going to make – the only time he made an emotional decision was when Kimmy betrayed him to his face when he was defending her, and he was pissed about it.
Yeah.
And then it was emotional, but it was rationally the correct decision.
Honestly, in that particular circumstance, it was almost the emotional decision that he was not realizing what she was doing sooner. And it was more that, like, finally it only got emotional when so it was his emotional connection to her that is what led him to continue to defend her when it started to be more clear what was happening.
Yep.
Yeah. But so in any case, let's go ahead and jump back to the beginning of the finale here. I actually, before we even got to the episode, I had a note that Probst's hair in the live special looked like it was 5 inches tall.
Yes.
It was brushing doorways.
It looked like he had taken a blow dryer and pointed it straight at his hair, with product in it, and just blown it until it just stood up. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, not a big complaint, but I couldn't help but think it's like, that's not the best I've ever seen him look. But anyway, so then when we get to the actual episode, because we had an extended recap of all 6 players, but when we get to the actual, returning from the previous tribal council where Abby had been voted out, Keith is frustrated because he was thinking, well, Abby is someone you want to keep at the end, right? Wouldn't it have been better? And so he's frustrated, and Jeremy and Spencer are having to point out, it's like, the fact that you just now said you would rather have her at the end than us is why we voted her out, Like, you just explained our reason to do that.
Ah, yes, Keith.
Yeah. No, I mean, so the problem is that, like, Keith is not super strategy savvy. And so the problem is that I think Keith's weakness in the strategic sense is he is not able to put himself in the shoes of the other player in order to predict their behavior.
Right.
Something is either good for him or not good for him. And so he tries to make the things that are good for him happen, and he doesn't like it when things that are not good for him happens. But he's not able to understand why other people are making the decisions they are, and so he's not able to ever proactively alter the outcome of a situation.
Right. He's sitting there thinking, Abby is great to have at the end. I want her to be at the end if I'm at the end. So everyone should want that.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, like they were pointing out to him, like he just wasn't wrapping his head around that.
Yeah. Well, I also kind of wanted to point out, it's like, one of the other things that you don't know, Keith, is that before the conversation shifted last time, you were one of the people they were talking about voting out before Abby. Because, hey, wouldn't we like to keep Abby around? We don't need Keith. So in any case, it was I mean, it was interesting to watch, but at the same time, it was fairly predictable in the sense that we could guess what his reaction was likely to be, and so on. But so even before morning, we have Kimmy and Wentworth starting to plot and scheme. Kimmy definitely feeling, and correctly so, I would think, that she's number 4 in that alliance. I mean, despite Jeremy's protestations, I think that she was right, that she was going to be number 4, going with that group.
Yep.
And understandably too, in the sense of saying, well, you know, we want to do something different. And I don't even know that her idea was a bad one. It just unfortunately didn't work.
Nope. Too many idols.
Yeah. So the idea was that she and Keith and Wentworth would try to blindside one of the other 3, and they decided on Jeremy later, but that I don't think they were decided yet at this point. So that takes us to the challenge, and boy, this, you know, going in with 6 gave them very little breathing room, because it was just like challenge, 5 minutes of, well, who's it going to be? Tribal council. Challenge, 5 minutes, tribal council, and it was just so breakneck.
Yeah, because they had to do with going with 6. There's no reward.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time for any kind of reward or any kind of reflection.
Right.
It's just boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the stair climbing challenge plus puzzle was this immunity, and after this one, they said that there would be no more second chance stories. But this one, definitely, you could just tell how physically exhausting this one was likely to be. Just up and down all the stairs. I thought it was interesting. It was
an amazing challenge design, by the way. Like,
oh yeah, very cool.
When you looked at how the pieces were done, not the puzzle, but like the structure of the ones at the top, they had more holes that were like more similar in size. So like the earlier ones were like a big hole and then a little hole, and like 2 or 3, and then there was like 4 and then 5, and they were all. So as you're getting more tired, it's getting more complex.
Yeah.
But yes, there are less pieces, but they're harder to identify between themselves.
And it's further away too, so you're less able to see what the next piece is from the ground. You have to remember from being up there. And so, yeah, and so that was really cool. And then, of course, a puzzle up at the top too that, you know, was, I mean, the sliding puzzle, that's a pretty standard puzzle type, you know, and often how well you do on those is going to come down to whether you have studied strategies for sliding puzzles or not.
Well, and what I liked about this is that, yes, you have to know how to do a sliding puzzle, but it wasn't obvious how all the pieces, you know, it's not like you were just looking at something that was a picture you're familiar with.
Right.
Which already makes which sliding puzzles are already difficult enough. You know, you had to figure out what you were making also. So I thought this was, the progression in this challenge was really nice from a you know, just the way that it got exponentially more difficult. And you get to that and you start the sliding puzzle, you can barely hold yourself up because you've just finished a whole climb of the stairs, and you're trying to figure out, you're trying to learn what the puzzle is. You have to know how to do a sliding puzzle. Like the whole thing, I know I'm spending some time on it, but I thought it was very, very good challenge design.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it a lot. So we had Spencer sort of taking the lead relatively early, and no one just really ever catches him. Everybody does get to the puzzle before it's over, but at that point, you know, he had had enough time on it already that, you know, and the nature of that type of puzzle is that, like, unless you screw it up, if you have more time, you're almost certainly going to win, because it just takes a certain amount of time to do it. And so, you know, if you get to start it first, it's yours to lose at that point. So so Spencer wins, and it's his third individual challenge win for the season. Let's see. So at this point, Kelly, we hear she's primarily worried about the trio of Tasha, Jeremy, and Spencer, which she helpfully explains to the camera for any viewers who are not already picking that up. Tasha expresses that she's just fine having Spencer win because, you know, he's part of the alliance that she is pretty much, you know, she has staked her claim, who she's planning to support and who is the enemy in that regard. And so, you know, having Spencer win leaves Keith and Wentworth vulnerable. So let's get one of them. She has her Final Four plan. It's that simple. Kimmy's still included in that. So at that time, though, this is where Kimmy, now that she knows like who could be targeted and who not, it would be interesting to know whether she might have targeted Spencer instead of Jeremy if Spencer hadn't been immune. But at the same time, I think we can also recognize that certainly it's apparent to us that Jeremy is a real threat at that point. And so it was to her as well. One brief note, since we have a couple of live viewers, if you are watching this live, there is a little Q&A function that you can click on from the Hangout and ask us live questions. And so if you put some in there, we'll answer them. Or you can just continue to watch. That'd be fine too. So anyway, her plan is try to make everybody paranoid about a possible idol, which is not going to be hard because that's kind of you know, it's a reasonable concern anyway.
Yeah.
Not least because she actually does have one.
Yeah. There are 2 idols out there.
And so the idea is, okay, it's 4-2, but if they're splitting the vote and they're doing so with the understanding that the two remaining people are going to be voting for each other, then even just 2 votes would be enough to do it. But if that's what they're doing, then 3 votes is enough to turn it the other way. And so they could blindside Jeremy. It's a good plan, honestly. I think if, I mean, it would have worked if Jeremy had not had his own idol.
Yep.
So well, I guess at this point, because Spencer and Tasha figured it out, it would have been a tie.
That's what I was going to say, is the other point behind this is that, you know, again, coming back to what makes Jeremy's game so good is it was absolutely, like, in the end game, having Spencer as the alliance person above Kimmy, which he was, whether Jeremy says it or not, is better for him because Spencer figured this out. Spencer figured out how to get everybody to where they needed to be. Spencer became his soldier here at the end. I mean, he had an incredible sense of timing with who should be his, you know, number 2 at which points in the game and when to cast them loose and when to hold them close.
Right.
And I just, you know, I thought it was interesting, and I couldn't figure out a better time to say this, so I'll just say it now.
Okay.
That there were 2 people from the original Brains tribe way back when in the finals of this. It was nice because they got eradicated so early because they didn't really work well.
Yeah.
They work well with people who understand the subtleties of the game. And what it really proves, the way that this happened, with 2 Brains people making it and 1 Brawn, I guess he was. Was he on their season, or was he something?
No, Jeremy was a different.
Oh no, he was. He was with when you were with your loved one. Yeah. It shows that. I mean, we've seen it a few times, but it shows that even if you know how to play the game correctly, and you can even, you know, not just do it on paper, but actually execute, there's still this other piece. There's this social piece that isn't just about befriending people and opening yourself up. There's this pulse that you can have on the game. And it reminded me of why Boston Rob is so good, because he strategically is very smart. He gets the game inside and out. He can befriend people and make them feel at ease with him and feel like we talked about, many times. Everybody feels like they're in the final three with Boston Rob. He has that impeccable charisma, which Jeremy also has.
Yeah.
And then that last piece is that fingers on the pulse of what's right at what time. Like Boston Rob has that better than anybody. Jeremy had that pretty damn good.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier too, although I didn't say it, but I was thinking earlier too that Jeremy's game did remind me of Boston Rob, especially in Boston Rob's sort of classic winning season.
I mean, he played the way that Boston Rob said without saying these are Boston Rob's rules. He played by those rules.
Well, and not only that, but he was able to do it. He was able to do it in a season where everybody else was smart and experienced, which is impressive.
Which is why I think part of why he was unanimously voted is that all these people were so smart and could see everything, but nobody had that feel, that just intangible feel like Jeremy had. He just knew, and not to say and the thing is, he didn't know all of the information. He made mistakes. He made poor choices. But he had that general sense of like which way the wind was blowing. Yeah. So while he miscalculated what Kimmy was going to do, he correctly calculated that he should listen to Spencer at that time. And so he trusted Spencer to be the guy to be with him and give him the information. And he decided, you know what? Spencer's a smart guy. I don't agree with this, but this is the way we need to go right now. We need to do what he's saying. And it worked out. Yeah. Well,
and from very early in the season, that's who Steven was for Jeremy as well, was someone who is kind of like his right-hand man. He's the guy that can go around, do some reconnaissance, bring me information, and he's just always got this stuff turning, and so I can confide in him. We can work this stuff out, and he's so smart that I can kind of lean on that a little bit while still making my own decisions ultimately. But he can kind of process out all of the different scenarios, and then I can choose between them.
Yeah. He worked, like you said, it's a good comparison to Boston Rob because he worked like a very talented CEO.
Yeah.
You have, people coming to you and giving you recommendations and saying, here's what I think we should do. And then you decide which recommendation to go with at what time. And you have to have that feel for, yeah, this is the right thing now. This isn't the right thing now. I'm not going to do that. And he picked exactly the right time to get rid of Steven from that role. And the right time to bring Spencer into that role. Like his ebb and flow of who to trust, who to use, who to keep close. Yeah. Just when you look back on his entire game is just, it's impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a unanimous vote getting almost.
Yeah, almost. But so in any case, though, as Kimmy is doing this plot, she is not being as discreet as she thinks she is. Spencer and Tasha notice, they're suspicious. They take their concerns to Jeremy. And it was kind of an amusing scene, actually, too, just because it was the four of them sitting there talking about, yeah, so we're worried about the idol, so we're going to do the split vote, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, we're all agreed. All right. Kimmy goes off and leaves, and then just immediately is like,
no.
That was great. But at the same time, so although Spencer and Tasha are both pretty sure, and we, of course, know that they're right to doubt her, Jeremy is not convinced. He's pretty sure she's innocent and that they're just being paranoid. He doesn't want to risk an idol screwing everything up just because they got paranoid. And so he actually goes to try to not confront Kimmy exactly, but just sort of say, there's some mistrust going on around here. What's going on? What's going on? And so she gets very defensive and emotional about it, which is interesting because it's sort of both an act and not, because on the one hand, there's the element of, oh shit, they're onto me. But also it's that weird cognitive dissonance that someone in her position can have, where you know that they're right not to trust you, and yet you still can't but be a little bit hurt that they don't trust you. It's a little bit of a childish reaction, and I don't mean to call Kimmy childish. It's just, it's kind of a sort of a primal emotional level of, you want it to work out the way you want. And anything that challenges that is a problem. And so her ability to deny it and be upset is kind of, she's upset both because they're potentially going to ruin her plan, but also because, what, they don't trust me? See, I knew I was right to betray that alliance. They didn't trust me. That sort of thing. Now, yeah. I don't want that to sound like I'm even really criticizing Kimmy at this point, because honestly, I think she was right to try to make a move.
Yeah.
It didn't work, but it was the right move at the right time, I think, given where she was in the game.
It absolutely was, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Jeremy comes back. He's still pretty sure that that she's innocent. And I was really amused at his conversation with Spencer, where they were both right about something and both wrong about something, both 100% sure in both positions. So Jeremy is like, Kimmy is innocent and Wentworth might have an idol. And Spencer's like, Wentworth does not have an idol and Kimmy is not innocent. And it was just amusing from our perspective, saying, you guys just need to rotate 90 degrees and you'll be perfect here.
Which they kind of realized, they just didn't know which 90 to go. Like,
yeah.
Jeremy's like, you're not giving it all. Spencer goes, you're not either.
Yeah.
And it's the thing, if Jeremy had given in a little bit on his trust of Kimmy, and Spencer had given in a little on his fact that Wentworth had an idol, then they would have locked up. But they weren't sure. They knew
ultimately, I think,
to give, but they didn't know which way.
I think ultimately it was Jeremy that did. I mean, we didn't see it happen, but then when Spencer in the tribal council announces, we are all three going to vote together instead of splitting the vote like we said previously, I don't think he would have. I don't think he took that on his own volition against Jeremy's wishes. I think they must have agreed on that. And they probably agreed to spring it on Kimmy at the last minute, because it's the sort of thing of like, listen, if you are actually with us, it's all fine. So we're suspicious, but we're actually doing this like as a test right now. So if you're really with us, just know that we've decided to change the plan. And we're telling you right now about that. So, although I guess technically they said they were all voting together and they didn't say who it was going to be, though, I guess, now that I think about it.
Yeah, but as long as she didn't vote for Jeremy, then
yeah, exactly. So in any case, we get to that tribal council. I couldn't help but
that's one of the best tribal councils.
Yeah. Oh, I know, it was amazing. But like, even just to start, we get Abby giving everybody bitch face from the jury, coming in just with the, can't blame her. She's mad she got voted out. That's a completely reasonable reaction, but we certainly did have the camera linger a little bit on her scowling at everybody. There's some discussion how everybody kind of agrees that there are definitely alliances now. And it's also a little bit funny early on, everybody dancing around the discussion of it being Keith and Wentworth between them, because it's sort of like, for kind of everybody there except Keith, they know that that's not really the situation. And yet nobody else wants to tip that they know. So everybody's kind of pretending that that's what it is, even though 5 out of 6 of them know that's not what it is.
Yes.
It was kind of funny watching them try to have that conversation. And in fact, I think it was uncomfortable enough that that's what led. I mean, I think they maybe decided they were going to, but that's why Spencer went ahead and just said, "All right, look, here's what's happening. We were going to split the votes. We're not anymore. This is what's going on."
I thought that was such an amazing play. Like,
yeah.
I respected that so much from Spencer. Like, God, because it made sense. It got Jeremy what he wanted, which was, look,
let's give Kimmy a chance.
We'll give Kimmy a chance,
And
it was great. It would just throw that out there, why dance around? And what it ended up doing was that proclamation is what got all the idols moving, which for everybody, let's be honest, that for everybody who's not Jeremy or Kelly, that was a great outcome.
Yeah.
You essentially flushed them both without really meaning to by putting everybody on their back heels. And it was great. You get, I was just so happy with Spencer after that one. What I didn't like was when he followed it up with trying to tell Kelly that she's good when he knew he was voting.
And see that, I think that's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier and what Kelly had mentioned in her interview, which was just this element of kind of taking that part of it half a step too far. So at that point, it feels more like a personal betrayal than it needed to. And we understand Spencer was just worried maybe she has an idol, and if she does, I'm kind of hoping that she won't play it. So maybe I can try to nudge her away from playing any potential idol she might have. But ultimately, she just saw right through it and just said, oh, yeah, I knew exactly when he said that meant that they were going to vote for me and not for Keith. And honestly, it would be dumb of them to vote out Keith before her anyway. Like, it makes no sense that anyone would even question which one of them they should vote out first. Why?
Well, Keith is decent at certain kinds of challenges, but
that's true.
That's the only thing. But no, to the whole, yes, she should go first. If you have the ability, get rid of her first. And yeah, you're right. He overplayed that, and that was a mistake on his part. And it also, this particular moment was when I first started to recognize, not that I didn't realize Jeremy was playing a great game, but this was the first example of that that not tipping his hand. And in this one, I don't necessarily know that he meant it, because what he was doing was playing up, I think, for Kimmy. Like, his body language was just like, no, I'm so disgusted that we have to do this exercise because we all know everything's good. So what's the hell is the point? And so he's kind of sitting there, and you're almost like, is he not on board with them? Because he's sort of shaking his head and rolling his eyes, and he's like, no, just not happy about it. And that's what he was doing. His body language was showing he doesn't agree with it. He's chosen to go with it. He thinks it's a futile exercise because Kimmy's just going to vote the way that she's supposed to vote, and because they do
not just futile but dangerous, because Kelly might actually have an idol, right?
Right, and and to your point earlier, where they didn't say who they were going to vote for, they did actually say vote the way that you're supposed to.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It's some iteration of that. So basically, if Kelly had voted how she was supposed to vote, or Kimmy had voted the way she was supposed to vote.
Right, because the plan to split was guys vote for Keith, girls vote for Wentworth. So they did tell her in that they were basically just saying, you do the same thing you were going to do, assuming that's actually what you were going to do. Everything's fine.
Yep. So they gave her the opportunity, and Jeremy was just sitting there, and he was just like, and that's why, you're watching it, and you're like, Spencer wouldn't have said that if they weren't all on board, but Jeremy doesn't look on board, which ultimately is good for him because when Spencer's over there, like, oh, you're good, and Jeremy's looking like this sucks. Like, hey, you can see which one is playing, better. Like Spencer was so see through that, you're definitely not good, and Jeremy was more, you just didn't know what he was gonna do.
Right.
So Kimmy's kind of looking like, well, I don't even know, because they weren't all like unanimously like sitting there and like staring at Kelly, or Kimmy, because Jeremy's looking totally discombobulated. So Kimmy's kind of feeling like, well, I think we should still go with this because I'm not 100% sure that's what they're going to do,
Right. Well, and she recognizes too, ultimately she decided to make her move for a reason.
The move was still the right move. Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, there's no reason for her to back off of that, because that just puts her right back in the situation she had already deemed unacceptable. And so the only chance was to, she was out on a limb, and her only chance was to go ahead and just try to get over to the other tree, or whatever the mixed metaphor is, right. Rather than try to get back to where she was.
I think everyone played this tribal council impeccably based on what their situation was, with the exception of two things. One was Spencer overplaying the conversation with Kelly.
Yeah, it was unnecessary. He should have left that alone.
And the second was Keith not understanding that he could have ended this very quickly by just choosing one of them and being done with it, and he had multiple times to do that. Mm-hmm. One wouldn't have mattered. Well, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered because it would have been on the idol if he had voted for Kelly. And then the other, when he had the chance to change his vote, he should have just changed it to Kimmy and been done with it.
Yeah, well, let's come back.
Obviously, it's complex.
But yeah, we're not quite there yet. I certainly agree with you that he almost made an extremely dumb decision, and only by virtue of other players demanding that he not do that because it was dumb.
But what I'm saying is it never needed to come to that. When they said, do you want to change your vote, he could have eliminated that whole conversation by being like,
sure, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for Kimmy.
Well, so let's come back to that in a moment because we're not quite there yet. So before even the first vote, it becomes apparent that it's likely to be a 3-3 tie. It's not confirmed, but that, there's actual discussion of, hey, we'll go to rocks if we have to. Mm-hmm. And then Kimmy starts saying, protesting, because I think she knows that, at least the secrecy is gone now. And she felt like she was in fourth. And then Spencer and Jeremy's like, well, hey, if you're actually with us, like you're trying to say that you are, it's all fine. But in any case.
Also got to note that when the guy most heavily proclaiming that we are willing to go to rocks has immunity,
yeah.
It made sense in the moment, but when I kind of took a step back and I was evaluating, again, both Jeremy and Spencer's end games, mm-hmm. and I'm looking at Spencer's missteps, this isn't one that got him not voted to win, but it's part of that attitude. Okay, you're the one proclaiming that, but you aren't going to have to do it.
It's another data point in the developing pattern of arrogance that is ultimately what everybody rejected his gameplay for.
Yes.
But so in any case, Kelly plays her idol. Good for her, because not only is it in retrospect obvious that it was the right move, but also just it seemed very clear that her plan to blindside Jeremy wasn't going very well. So in any case, she plays it, and it was hilarious to have Jeremy's like, "I told you" to Spencer. But at this point, right. and at this point, I think everyone except Jeremy is assuming, okay, well, that means that we'll, I guess if she played the idol, I don't know. I guess it happened so quickly. So Jeremy recognizing, well, given that I know what was going on, if she plays the idol now, I have to. didn't necessarily know that it was going to be him. I guess they didn't really get that far, but it just seems like it was going to be him or Tasha, and he's got to protect himself, right? He's not willing to take a chance that it might be Tasha instead of him.
Right. Just
Why
to have
would
it
he?
one more time. Like, yeah, don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, they were both right to do so, and this is where we get this first in 31 seasons scenario of all the votes do not count. There is no legitimate vote left, which was kind of, it's a little interesting just to realize that has never happened before, because we've certainly had some crazy tribal councils before with multiple immunities being played, but to have all of them exactly cancel out is kind of fascinating.
Yes. And I have to pay up on my bet because this has never happened was not a Final Four. It was no vote.
I knew going into the episode after our recording, but we got a comment. Well, this is a good opportunity to bring it up. We got a comment on the website from Mike K from SoCal, who is, a longtime listener. But one of the things that he said after listening to our last episode was, if you want to know if it's a final 2, 3, or 4, just check your DVR or TV program guide or read the press release, and it basically says in there that it was going to be a final 3. And so it's like that. It was, I guess, in the little episode description that goes out to TV Guide and stuff. But he then goes on to say, when Jeff says, for the first time in 31 seasons, he is at tribal council with the voting urn open. So, and he guesses it exactly right. So he says, so my guess is that both Jeremy and Kelly played their idols either for themselves or the players targeted, and all votes were canceled. This would lead to the immunity challenge winner and the 2 who are saved by idols being immune, and a revote, which could lead to a tie that would lead to either a rock draw or possibly a fire-making challenge, or someone flips to break the tie. So good on you for guessing that exactly right. Now, he did have that extra piece of information that we didn't have, which was knowing that it wasn't going to be anything related to like the Final Four or whatever. It's just, but yeah, good for you. And thanks for writing in the comment.
Yeah. He's always good for those. Yeah.
Fact checking us.
Fact checking.
Yeah. So in any case, this was led to brief chaos because everyone's just like, whoa, so what do we even do? And in their little panicked discussion, Keith basically completely rats out that Kimmy did exactly what they all thought. Spencer had been trying to say so, but then Keith just basically confirmed it, and you could see Kimmy just like, oh, okay. But at that point, I mean, I don't think we blame Keith for that. At that point, it's kind of dumb to try to keep up the pretense.
No, because Jeremy didn't even necessarily, he believed it once Spencer told it, because he kept saying, who voted for me? Who voted for me? And Spencer calms him down and says, Kimmy, Kelly, Keith, that's your 3 votes.
Yeah.
And that's when it clicked with Jeremy. So the Keith thing, yeah, but ultimately, if Spencer had said that without Keith saying anything, Jeremy still would have understood.
Yeah.
The other thing that I don't know this for a fact, but I sort of gleaned from the way that Probst was describing what happened. I feel like they stopped this tribal council and went and had a conversation, like as producers and Probst, because when I don't remember exactly what he said when he was kind of drawing it all up on that photo. Again, also I don't know this, but if they don't sell that with the auction items, they are ridiculously stupid.
I made the same note.
Yeah. So
but yeah.
But he made some comment that made it sound like they weren't he wasn't so confident in what happened that he could just roll with tribal.
Right.
It really felt like it broke. They went and discussed it, and they said, what do we do? Well, we got to get rid of somebody. Well, okay, let's just play it like, here's what we're going to do. And then they came back and established it. So it leads to, you can understand why the confusion on the contestants is probably heightened, because with Probst not smoothly navigating that,
Mm-hmm.
if he's having to stop and go have conversations and figure it out, they're probably all like,
well, so in one of the post-show interviews, what Probst said about that, he didn't really say whether there was like a gap, but essentially what might have happened along those lines is like they have rules established already. So it's not like they had to make up something. But
right.
because it's an unusual situation, they had to consult the rules to make sure that they say the right thing and do the right thing.
Right.
Because, you don't want to make it up and then realize, oh shoot, we actually had contractual rules that we laid out in this contract, and then that's not what we did. But so in any case, the result of that initial thing is to completely revote, but now Jeremy and Wentworth still immune, Spencer still immune. Only people eligible to be voted for at this point are Tasha, Kimmy, and Keith, with all 6 voting. So now is also the opportunity. It's another opportunity where Kimmy also could have chosen to, well, no, I guess, never mind. I take that back. Because at that point, yeah, I don't know. I think at that point it was clear what that division was going to be. So I don't think Kimmy had any choice at that point. Never mind what I was going to say there. So in any case, it results in a 3-3 tie between Tasha and Kimmy. So a tie for the second set of votes. Now it would be like, so the rule would be everybody besides Tasha and Kimmy vote again. But the only reason we didn't do another vote is just because it's like, well, we can actually just sort of informally poll people. If nobody's going to change their vote, then let's not waste time going up and writing the same thing on your ballot again.
Right.
So because they're deadlocked, I thought it was interesting that the 4 of them get to like discuss, and my phone just buzzed at me for reasons unknown. Because they have this discussion, but they have to come to a unanimous decision now between Tasha and Kimmy. And if they can't, then it would be a situation where everybody draws rocks except for Tasha and Kimmy. That's the way you normally handle a deadlocked tie, except that Spencer, Kelly, and Jeremy are all still immune. And so now if you leave out Tasha and Kimmy, it's literally only Keith that could go out at that point. So it would be drawing rocks with only one person drawing a rock.
Right.
Which is kind of a hilarious situation. So obviously in that situation, Keith is highly motivated to form a unanimous agreement if that can be made to happen. But because Kelly may not cooperate, it's like he's in a tough position there. But Kelly is pragmatic. She is at that point basically saying, look, let's, they're determined it's not going to be Tasha. We have to decide between Tasha or Kimmy. So it's going to be Kimmy. Except that then Keith is jumping in and like, well, I don't know. I'll just send me to the house and she can stay because, she's a mom. And everyone else is just like, what? I mean, Kimmy obviously is on board with the idea. She's doing the puppy dog eyes, please help me, Keith. And I'm not even criticizing her for that. She's doing what she needs to do. But at the same time, it was everyone else is just kind of going, Keith, what? No, what are you? And
that's not how this works, Keith. Like, you don't just walk away after all of this.
And so what Keith actually said about it is that he had kind of lost the thread of how it was all actually supposed to work. Like, what are the rules here? I don't understand what's happening anymore. This is stressful and upsetting. I kind of just want to leave. I kind of want to just do something so that we can be done with this, even if that means me going.
Well, and he gave a further point, which was proven true, that, like, why go through all this stress It's just going to be me next time.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'll just go now.
Yeah. Well, and of course we say, like, the answer is that you don't know that for sure.
Right.
That'd be true.
It ended up being true, but
yeah.
Yes, at the time, yeah, of course you don't know that, especially because he's good at these kind of lead challenges. Like,
not only that, but it wouldn't have been true if not for Kelly Wentworth winning the next immunity challenge. It totally would have been her next.
Also true, yeah.
Yeah, so Kelly is the one who kind of insists and just kind of digs in and says, Keith, no, don't do that. It's dumb. Just don't do that. It's going to be Kimmy. Just stop it.
And from Kelly's perspective, that was a very smart move for a couple of reasons. Mm-hmm. One is you don't need Kimmy coming back and begging forgiveness of the alliance and somehow getting back into it.
Yeah.
Now it's done. They're galvanized against her and not you. Like, let that just happen and then go on for another day. Don't let it come back. Let Keith walk away and have the four of them just be like, all right, Kimmy, you know what? Sorry we did that, but let's just get rid of Kelly because we need to. Mm-hmm. We'll deal with the rest of this later. And so from Kelly's perspective, like, yeah. No, It wouldn't have mattered either way because she was going to be the next to go probably anyway if she didn't win immunity.
Right.
But she had a better chance this way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in any case, Kimmy is voted out. We should maybe just note, because it came up in the final tribal council, that once he was finally convinced of her betrayal, Jeremy was rather gleeful and a little bit spiteful in voting for Kimmy at that point. And he was kind of like, they described him skipping over to cast his vote. And he's kind of being playful with it, and a little bit of, like, I don't want to say mean-spirited. That's not quite right. But it's more a matter of, you could see how that would be upsetting for Kimmy, and it doesn't necessarily look great. He had a good defense for it, especially since ultimately he can really spin it not unreasonably as he is the wronged party.
Right. Which comes
he is
back
being punished for her betrayal.
Why I think everything he did stacked up correctly. Because again, it doesn't totally blow a hole in that. Mm-hmm. But if he brings Wentworth instead of Spencer, he less can speak from that position of the, because let's be real, he's speaking from a holier than thou position. Like, mm-hmm. I was the one who was doing everything right. You went and did this, and that's why I had an emotional response. But if you take Wentworth instead of Spencer, it's just a little bit harder to sit on that throne, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's just, he stacked up all these things so nicely. You know, he just did a very, very good job.
Well, and what's interesting, too, is our recognition that it's a little bit of a cardboard throne, too, because it kind of worked out that way that he stayed with his alliance. But there were certainly times where he considered going against that alliance. He just ultimately never made that decision. He weighed the options and then chose not to do that.
And there were times they considered going against him, which is the second layer that after you gave your Spencer speech earlier, and we sort of moved on. I was going to say there's a second layer to Spencer's relationship building. You know, yes, there was the one that you talked about of, because he was trying to build all these relationships, he ended up hurting people's feelings more and making them feel betrayed. Well, the other piece to it is, you know, because he built that relationship with Jeremy, Jeremy was bringing him along too, just as much as Spencer was saving Jeremy just as much as Jeremy was bringing Spencer along.
Right. Yeah.
So there were times where Spencer had an option to go with a group to get rid of Jeremy, and he chose not to, not because it wasn't strategically the best move, but because he had a relationship with Jeremy.
Yeah.
So it worked for Jeremy's favor, too, to have that relationship with Spencer, because the guy who was kind of shifting and moving never shifted and moved against him when he had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And Spencer even said, I thought about that at the end of it. Like, there were a lot of times I could have gotten rid of him, and I didn't.
Yeah.
Because I had a relationship with him. So,
Right. So,
it's a complicated game.
Yes. Kimmy's voted out. That was a crazy tribal council. I immediately asked the question of, since the idols were played, are they put back in the game? And the answer seems to be yes, although there was the actual, nobody found one. But there was more to that. The possibility of them being there was relevant.
Yes.
So we have a little bit of Keith and Wentworth basically saying, well, shoot, we have now don't seem to have any opportunity to not be 5-4 now. So there's discussion of looking for idols again right away. Kelly Wentworth is frustrated to be in this position of, like, you're so close, but you're just on the wrong side of the numbers, and it's increasingly going to be impossible to do anything about that. So although, who knows? So we'll come back to that, but just that fake idol, it could have potentially gone another way.
I don't think it would have, and I'll tell you why when we get to it.
All right.
Because it's a further of my piling on of why I think Jeremy played an impeccable game at the end of the game. Well, all the game, but his end game was fucking top notch.
Well, that's certainly the difference in terms, we talk about Spencer's gameplay versus Jeremy's gameplay. When we talk about the last couple of episodes, like this last finale, the last couple of tribal councils, Jeremy's game was peak, and Spencer's game kind of crumbled. Mm-hmm. So in any case, this is also where we got, Prost marking up the picture, which was great. I mean, I felt like I had followed it at the time, but it probably doesn't hurt to have that extra explanation, just because it was so unusual.
And they were throwing out terms that we're familiar with that aren't necessarily clear. And I know this for a fact because, again, I was watching with somebody who wasn't as familiar, and they were lost. And, they were like, well, wait, I thought you said they went to draw rocks. And I was like, well, yeah, but because he's the only rock draw, and all this stuff. And it was very helpful.
Yeah. So we have, so now's the next challenge, and this is the one where it's the great big production.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
So we got 6 stations of obstacle course to collect puzzle pieces, and then the final puzzle. One of the weird things about this challenge is that it's very difficult to gauge who's in the lead, because even though one person might have 3 bags and someone else has 2, it depends on which obstacles they've done, because they're not all equally time consuming. Some of them are more difficult than others.
I feel like that's part of the point.
Yeah, it keeps it kind of up in the air. It's not. Yeah. Spencer kind of just lagged throughout and really never caught up. It might just be because he's exhausted, which is reasonable. Everybody else has kind of gone through that phase. But yeah, so in any case, Wentworth and Keith end up being the 2 front runners of all people, and then Wentworth wins. So I couldn't help but think I was really happy when she won, just because I felt like, not only do I like her, so I like that generally, but I just felt like, from a strategic perspective, she is the most interesting person to have win at this point, because she was the one that would have almost certainly been targeted otherwise.
Yep.
Plus, it's nice just because I like her, and it was seeming increasingly obvious that she probably won't win. So having her get something else was nice. It's a cool challenge, though. This is not a big complaint, but I feel like the whole obstacle course part looked really cool. And then I felt like the puzzle itself, although probably difficult, was less visually interesting compared to the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like if they had swapped this puzzle with the sliding face puzzle from the previous one, I think that almost would have been better.
That makes sense.
That's minor nitpick though, because it was a really cool challenge generally. So this is the worst possible outcome for Keith, as he says in a confessional, but I couldn't help but think it's like, is it though? It's more just like, it's only the worst because you had reconciled that you're not going to be able to do anything else. So it's only just like, well, because it's not going to be her, it's going to be me. I wish it was going to be her instead. So that makes this the worst. But it's also just like, well, yeah, but you know, now what also means is that your primary ally is immune. So maybe we should try to figure out some sort of way to trick this alliance of three into doing something different. Like, maybe what if, for example, we made a fake idol and we played it to make them think that now they have to vote out one of their own instead of voting for me. Except that. So, well, I guess we're not quite there, but this is where she makes the fake idol. And it was amazing looking because she'd been planning ahead, which was another thing that's awesome about her gameplay, because I see she, you know, obviously was not in the finals, but she played a great season 2. And I think that, you know, we talked a little bit already that I think she would have gotten votes if she was in the final. I would love to see her come back again. I think she's a great player, and she did a great job, and planning ahead to have all these extra little bits to fake an idol, especially the fact that she one of the things she said in an interview is that she had actually saved the piece of paper that came with one of the real idols.
She didn't. That wasn't just in the interview. She showed it on the show.
Okay, yeah.
She wrapped it in the package.
Yeah. I saw that she wrapped it, but I guess just clarifying that is actually what it was.
Yeah, she did say that.
Okay.
Like, and here's the packaging that my idol came in. I'm gonna wrap this in that packaging. Yeah, she did say that. It was awesome. Yeah.
Just for anyone watching the video, the reason I keep kind of shifting around every so often is that I literally have a dog asleep right where the most comfortable place for me to put my feet would be. So I kind of keep shifting around because I'm not able to put my feet where I would normally put them. I could shoo her away, but why? So in any case, though, she makes the fake idol. It looks great. So at this point, Jeremy is trying to, this is where he's now getting proactive. And he doesn't want to take a chance that they're going to turn on him. And there is a hilarious extended moment of him trying to get Keith's attention. It's like that scene in The Three Amigos where Steve Martin is making all the bird sounds. It's, "Look up here, look up here." That was amazing how long that went on. And it was good, you know, because he has to be quiet because Tasha's asleep right behind him. He doesn't want her to wake up. But at the same time, just it's like Keith is just staring into space. He's like snapping his fingers. It was great. And so he mouths Spencer. But here's the thing, though. I think this was fake out on 2 levels. One, fake out to us from the producers, but also fake out to Keith from Jeremy. I don't think he ever intended to actually
100%.
vote for Spencer with Keith. He was trying to give Keith and Kelly hope to say, look, I want you to do this so that you won't do something else unpredictable. Also, just in case something unexpected happened, I want you to be voting 2 votes for someone other than me.
Right. And this is what I was saying when I said, and my piling on of how Jeremy played so great. This was the moment when I said, you know what? At first I looked at Abby and I was like, not Abby from the show, but Abby, my fiance. And I was like, no, Jeremy, no, don't, not this close to the end. Don't betray everything you've been saying. And I said, wait a minute. I bet this is what he did. And that's what played out. And she was like, you watch too much of this show. But that's why I think it was a great move, because I believe, and I'll tell you why I think it didn't affect the idol later, or at the end of this.
Okay.
I believe 100% it was all a fake out. He knew he could convince them to vote for Spencer and never himself have to vote for Spencer. And when the idol part comes into play, he doesn't have to worry then. If he knows they're both voting for Spencer, the others can vote for Keith. And if the idol is played by Keith, it is Spencer who goes home. And while that's not his ideal scenario, he doesn't have to worry about it. So if the idol comes out, he sits there and says, no, just do what I need to do. And that's how he played every tribal council for the end, was do what I'm supposed to do and what I've got everybody else saying they're going to do, and this is going to work out okay. And it would have there too. Had Keith had a real idol and Jeremy had done exactly what he did in this episode and voted the way that he did, Spencer would have gone home because of the idol, and Jeremy wouldn't have had to vote against him. So I don't think it would have mattered if Keith had really pulled it out and tried to play it and cause chaos, because Jeremy had set it up in a point where he didn't think that. And okay, maybe it sketches out Spencer's vote, but so what? What does Spencer do? He votes for Jeremy. Well, that's one vote. That doesn't count. It's still Spencer that goes home. Jeremy planned it to neutralize the idol. And the way that he had stuck with everything, I don't think he would have freaked out.
In principle, there's one outcome where it could have been, even if it's a guarantee that Keith and Kelly were voting for Spencer because they believed what Jeremy was planning to do. But if the idol thing was disrupted and it leads the 3 of Jeremy, Spencer, Tasha, like, okay, now they're potentially in this position of having to vote for one of their own, right? It's possible that Spencer and Tasha would vote for Jeremy together, especially since, as we hear later, Tasha did actually feel closer to Spencer than to Jeremy. And so it's possible that could have produced a 2-2-1 tie, with Jeremy's original vote not counting because of the idol. And so, or if he had changed it, like if you're saying that he wouldn't have even changed his vote. So see, that's where it could could have gone wrong. But again, my real point is not that
worst it could have gone wrong would have been a tie.
Yes. But
even with the idol play. So
I'm not criticizing anything about Jeremy's play. I'm criticizing Keith for being dumb that he had an opportunity to try to do something and chose not to do it.
Right, and I understand that, and I'm not saying that Keith shouldn't have done that. My point is that had he done that, I don't think it would have mattered. Because, and again, this is part of the narrative I created in my own mind, maybe.
It would not have mattered to Jeremy. Spencer would have gone home.
Okay. Well, no, if it was a real idol, Spencer would have gone home.
Well, I don't think.
But it wasn't a real idol. So
listen, if Keith pulls out before the vote says, I'm not going home tonight, puts on something that looks real, and it has the piece of paper that says, this is an idol, you think they're still going to cast all their votes for him? I'm not sure they will.
Right, but it doesn't guarantee Spencer goes home because it's not a real idol. So,
well, but what I'm saying is, do you think they cast their votes for Keith when he's wearing something that looks like a real idol? They're going to just take the chance that it's fake?
Jeremy can and be safe.
But why would Tasha and Spencer do that?
So say they don't. It creates a tie. It doesn't force Spencer to go home.
Okay, except that is different than saying it would all be fine and nothing would be different. That puts Jeremy potentially in having to do like a tiebreaker fire challenge or something.
Fair. Okay.
Now, I'm not saying it would have been different. I'm saying it could have been different, and we didn't ever even have the opportunity to see because Keith just didn't play. He could have tried it and did not. And so he did not do everything that he could have to stay. And that's annoying to me.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Yes.
Especially since from Kelly's perspective, she feels like she went to a lot of trouble coming up with a cool plan and gave him an opportunity to do something to save himself and help her in the process, and chose not to do it because of it would have seemed cheesy.
Yeah, no, I'm there. I see what you're saying. Because you're right. The narrative that I created and why this it doesn't work with the idol being played prior to the votes, which is what you're suggesting and what he should have done.
Yes, which they actually talked about before the tribal council was the idea of him doing that, because that's the only thing that it's good for.
That's pretty sure I'm never going to play Survivor. As much as I love it, it's just not. I've never applied for it. Probably never will. So that makes it probably that I'm never going to play it. But if I do, and someone puts on something that looks like an idol prior to the votes, I'm gonna roll the dice and say it's fake. Because we've seen now there's only been the early seasons with the idol where they were able to leverage it to get votes. Like Yule did a great job of that way back then.
Well, that was back when you could play it. You could choose to play it or not only after you see what the votes are.
Right.
Which made it way more powerful.
Way more powerful, which is why you could leverage it earlier. Now, the best idol plays we've seen are when no one knows anything.
Exactly, because
like not even your trusted allies.
Because the primary strength of it is the ability to nullify as many votes as possible. If you tell them you have it, that makes it less likely they're going to vote for you and more likely they're going to vote for someone else, which means that you cannot nullify their votes with your idol. Right. So if you can be sure they're going to vote for you and then play your idol, you take their votes out of the equation. Right. And that's where its primary strength is. So
the other way, also the way you're talking about is, say you use it and not nullify. Well, even if you don't play it, but you just deflect votes and you make it to the next one and you still have your idol. Well, all they're all going to do is find a way to get rid of your idol, even the people who are with you. Yeah. Because they don't want that shit in play. Like they're gonna help the rest of them to get rid of your idol. You know. So. Yeah, it works the best when no one knows, not even your closest ally. Like we've seen that when they tell their ally and it doesn't play out right. This season, they kept it on lockdown and they were able to use it to save themselves at very critical moments or save someone else at a very critical moment, knowing they had another idol. But, you know.
Yeah, so in any case.
I think Jeremy played it impeccably.
Oh, agreed, 100%. He did a great job.
Because he ended up, if the idol was played after the vote, he essentially nullified the idol by deflecting the votes off of him.
Yeah.
By playing to their weakness.
Right. Just in case it turns up that they do have an idol, he knows that they're not going to have voted for him.
Yep.
So in any case, we have I don't actually even have a lot of notes from the tribal council other than he didn't pretend to have it like I thought he was going to, because that was the whole point. But discussion of expecting the unexpected.
Yeah, again, Jeremy just not tipping his hand. Just he's throwing the stuff out there. He's playing to the jury. He's playing to the group. He's in such a groove at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Which again comes back to why it would have been a mistake to take Wentworth, because if you've got a nice winning streak going, why do something different?
Mm-hmm.
Just he's in that groove. He's in the zone with this whole how he's got things working, and then he goes and he gets rid of the guy that helped him get there just to bring Kelly. Like, no, that would have just. There's so many reasons why that wasn't the right choice, and why I'm glad.
Yeah.
That he took Spencer, and why that's part of his unanimous voting. Even though I think, I wouldn't say Spencer's a better player than Kelly. I shouldn't say that, because they both did. They were playing from different positions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
So we end up the 2 votes cast for Spencer, but then because it was all a fake out from Jeremy, Keith is actually voted out. He says in his final words, it's important to have integrity, which is why he didn't use his fake idol. And I actually put in my notes at this point, Wentworth, I'm sure, would be furious that is the reason.
She put a lot of work into it too.
It looked awesome. It was incredible. And then he just wasted it.
It wasn't just a stick.
It might not have worked. But he didn't even try it. And there was no reason not to try it. He went home as a result.
It wasn't just a stick.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man, that was such a great moment. For anyone who hasn't been watching as long or just doesn't remember, there's a great moment. I don't even remember exactly what season it was, but it was Eliza and who? Someone else, I don't remember. So the point being that there was discussion of whether or not is this a real idol, but it looked terrible. It was, as said, it's just a stick.
Yeah.
How can you even question that this is the real idol? It's just a stick.
And this, I don't remember who did that. For some reason, I picture in my head JD doing that. of JD and Steven. But I'm not positive that's the season it was. But it was somebody kind of like that.
I don't think so. I think it was one of the like Heroes versus Villains season or something like that. Right. Or I feel like, because I don't know. I would have to look it up. I don't remember. I remember the scene, but not the context.
Put a fucking stick.
Yeah.
Where the idol used to be.
It was kind of fancy and carved just a little bit, but it was pretty weak compared to Kelly's.
Yes, it was a stick. Mm-hmm. And her reaction when she grabbed it, she's like, "What is this? It's just a stick." Yeah.
Well, especially because she had gotten her hopes up, thinking it's like, all right, an idol. Wait, what? Yeah.
Anyway.
So that brings us to the final immunity challenge. It's the sort of dexterity focus challenge with the balls on the little tracks. It's kind of a cool challenge, I think. But what it can do that's a little bit interesting compared to other challenges is you can make a mistake that's going to cost you the challenge and not realize it for quite a long time, because what ultimately knocked Spencer out at the end was just 2 of them came at once. There's nothing you can do. the ball came out here over here and over here. You can't grab them both at once because you only have the one hand, and it's over. And it's only a result of he didn't do this spacing. Like it's a little bit like chaos. It's like you can't know for sure in advance what spacing you need to do when it gets to like 4 or 5 of the things in there.
Right. And what I love about it, I mean, it's also an incredibly designed challenge, because I don't think, basically the balls don't come, depending on which direction they go, mm-hmm. they don't come through the final stage at the same speed.
Right.
So even if you've like let one space, drop it, it doesn't necessarily mean they won't stack up again at the end, because one side takes longer than the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so it like you said, it creates this chaos that makes it very difficult. Yeah. And
it's a chaos in a very specific way, because this sort of pros talked about it, the droning sound and the balls going around in circles like that could kind of almost hypnotize you. And you could see even early on how often they would start to go for it and realize, oh wait, no, it's not there yet. Oh yeah, wait, no, it's not there. And you could see them doing that even when it was just like 1 or 2 balls in there. It was hard, obviously, to stay focused on where it actually was. And I could just imagine that. So it's a cool challenge in that sense. I think it's a little bit more luck dependent than some, but that's not really a big problem. It's fine to do that sometimes, as long as they're not all like that. And obviously, even any element of luck, though, only really comes into play if you are able to hold up your piece of it. You know what I mean? Because mm-hmm. if you're not able to do it well, then the luck doesn't even enter into it. You don't even get that far. But so Wentworth actually goes out first. She's super bummed, obviously, because she knew she needed that one. And Tasha is next. And then with 5 balls in, we have it down to Jeremy and Spencer. Spencer ends up with 2 coming at once. There's just nothing to be done. And then it was interesting too, just how, like, we can certainly understand the emotional catharsis, and yet still it's not something we see every season, that Jeremy just was instantly super emotional as soon as he had it won. And this is not like in front of the jury, right? The only other people there, with one exception, are the people who are going to be sitting with him in the final 3, right? So it's not, there's no like jury pandering there. It's all just 100% sincere. Just like, this is when it really counted, and now he's there. And it was just really, he was overcome, and it was really it was great to see. And, even when we've seen other people in that situation, they don't always react that way. So, can't even express it. And I thought one of the things that actually also really rang true for me is he kind of talked about how it felt like it wasn't even happening now. It felt almost like this had happened already. And somehow he was sort of a little bit displaced in time mentally. Yep. Which I felt it really rang true for me, that would be kind of how it feels, is because you've been visualizing it for so long, and now it's here, and yet you've built it up in your head so much that it just almost like no real contemporary experience can quite actually capture all of that, and so it feels bigger than the actual moment in time that you're in. Yeah. And I thought that was really cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
I do need a quick restroom break.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. I will ramble. I'll go ahead and in advance of our later discussion, I'll just remind anyone watching or listening that you can always find links to the video version over at my website at christianaellis.com. and the YouTube channel as well, Christiana LS1. And that's where all the video versions of this and my other podcasts go. And then ChristianaEllis.com is where you can also find the the audio versions. It's available as a podcast feed there too, as well as all of the other things that I do. And so if you want to like contact me or listen to any of our other stuff, that's where you can find it. And so I hope that you will do that. And I'm continuing to ramble while I wait for Mike to return from the bathroom. And this is the sort of thing where if I was more production heavy on these podcasts, I could cut out a section like this and just leave it seamless for the listener to not realize that this even occurred, that there was any break at all. In fact, I could easily do that. And yet it would be more time consuming to actually edit the episode that way. So I'm not going to bother.
I wouldn't bother either.
Yeah. There's no reason, really. Honestly, just as a brief meta note, as far as podcasting is concerned, I think some of my favorite podcasts, one of the things that's great about them is that there's sort of an intimacy and familiarity with them that these sorts of little bits of real life that enter actually like add to that feeling rather than detract in the way they would with like a TV show. Any case, so we finished that immunity challenge. So we're now in a position where Tasha and Spencer are pretty sure that Jeremy is going to bring them along. Yes. But they recognize that as much as they can be pretty confident, it is not in their control ultimately.
Right.
Now, they do know that as long as the two of them stick together, then even if Jeremy decided that he wanted to bring Kelly, he could only make it into a tie. But it would also be a tie that he wouldn't particularly have any investment in because he could have it go either way. Because he's safe. He can, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
So he might well do that. But in any case, Tasha is saying she, just have to hope the relationship that we've built will stand. And then, to Jeremy and Spencer, to Spencer and Tasha, Jeremy says he's locked in. That's the plan, and that turns out to be what was true, which was, and it's for the exact reasons that you've mentioned a couple of times, which was just that to try to keep Kelly at this point would disrupt his whole thing that he's built. It would make his story harder to tell because it would be inconsistent with what he had been doing for a while.
Yeah.
So here's where we also see some additional signs that Spencer was starting to falter a bit, is that he kind of got ahead of himself and he's having a conversation with Kelly that's really almost more like jury lobbying than staying in the game strategy. And he's a little bit too forward with, well, yeah, I think I have a pretty good shot to win. And I mean, it's just, it can be true, and it's also just like this is maybe not the time and place for that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Especially since she's kind of hoping still that she doesn't go home. And so she immediately thinks, oh, well, see, this is exactly the sort of thing that is ammunition I can use against Spencer with Jeremy, which she proceeds to do. Good for her. That's exactly what she should do with that type of conversation that Spencer had with her. But, so at this point, what I like is even with his commitment to the alliance, he is still willing to entertain the other options in the sense that not that he's really wavering like he's a swing vote, but it's more just a matter of constantly reevaluating his decisions rather than just resting on his laurels.
Right. That's how he keeps his pulse on the game, is by asking the other questions.
Right. Like,
what's the other option? Yeah.
Right. Is this still what I want to be doing? Or am I just doing it out of momentum?
Yep.
Am I just doing it because I'm scared to do something else? Am I missing a better opportunity because I'm stuck stubbornly on this? Or am I doing it still because it's still the right thing? And he was constantly able to explore those other options and weigh them against sticking with his alliance. And in each case, for the last several, sticking with his alliance wins. And so that's what he does. But also recognizing, yes, let's give them something to chew on. Although in this case, what we hear afterwards is that he did tell Kelly that he was not planning to.
Right. We talked through all that already, and we're coming up on 2 hours. So
yeah. So in any case, we get to that final tribal council. Jeremy talks a little bit about needing to do what's right for him, and we talked through this too, in the sense that it was really smart of Jeremy to leave it uncertain, just uncertain enough that Spencer kind of freaked out and panicked a little bit and really blew it with the jury. It's hard to know how negative they would have been towards Spencer without this. But certainly they were more negative on him afterwards.
Yeah. It gave them something to really get after him about. So.
It was a key recent example that illustrated what their complaints were. And so it really torpedoed whatever chance he had after that. But I don't think he realized it right away. But yeah, so it was interesting just in the sense that it's a conversation that has been had many times on Survivor, where we have two people essentially arguing back and forth that the other one is the one that is more likely to win, so that's why you should keep me. Except that that's such a hard conversation to have, because you're also in front of the jury. It's like, in just a day or so, I'm hoping to be arguing why I should win. Yep. And now I'm having to argue why I won't.
Which is why he should have made his case at the beginning and just had the confidence that Jeremy was having, which is just
like I have people that I've been working with, and I just have to trust that they're going to do what they said they were going to do.
Right. And that's Jeremy was willing to go home some of those times because he was confident in what he had done, and it worked out for him. But had it not, he wouldn't have said, "Oh, I should have done this, this, and this." Like, I did what I was supposed to do, and it didn't work. Like, that's what Spencer should have done, and that's been said. Yeah.
So in any case, Kelly is voted out. I wrote that it was a valiant effort on her way out, in the sense that it was stacked against her. I don't think there was anything she could have done differently. The last several episodes, I think, in a row, that she did everything that she could have, and it just, that's the nature of the game sometimes. It just doesn't always work out, even if you do everything right. In any case, my note here was, I think Jeremy, in the absence of a strong position otherwise, decides that being able to stay true to his alliance benefits him. Kind of what you've been saying. I tend to, and I also note here is like, I tend to agree with that. Although even after that tribal council, I don't think I fully realized yet how much that meltdown had hurt Spencer either. I knew that it wasn't great, but I was still feeling like between Spencer and Kelly, I think Spencer was the bigger threat. I mean, I think, hindsight, after the final tribal council, we know that wasn't the truth, but didn't turn out to be true. But yeah, so Kelly is bummed to have not gotten as far as she wanted to, but proud of how she played, which I think is exactly how she should be feeling at that point. So now we're having everybody kind of recap their plans, reflecting as they get ready for the final tribal council. Tasha, I think, is fairly realistic and pragmatic about what's going on here, is recognizing, I don't have a very flashy resume compared to these guys, but she played a good social game. She's proud of herself, but I think she recognizes that she's not likely to really be in the equation there. You know, but maybe she's hoping for some votes. And Spencer's hitting his whole second chance narrative pretty hard. It was a little bit funny just because one of the things that Kelly had said in the previous tribal council was that he probably has his final tribal council speech planned out already. And he's like, oh, no. And we're like, yeah, he does. Of course he does. He's been rehearsing it all season. Except that he ended up not really being able to go that way because everyone kind of undercut so many of those points almost immediately. Because he wanted to go with this whole thing about how he changed and he grew and he was able to make these emotional bonds that he wasn't before, and that's what allowed him to do better, except that everyone is immediately talking about how he didn't do well at that and he made everybody mad. So it would be kind of hard for him to try to emphasize those things at that point. And then Jeremy is kind of, he just wants his family to be proud of him. And it's one of those, you know, we talked about this earlier in the season. I think it was actually about Jeremy, but it was this idea of often with bad players, strategy becomes an excuse to just do whatever it is that they want to do anyway. So if they don't want to work at camp, they come up with a reason why that's somehow their strategy is to not work at camp, that sort of thing. But with Jeremy, it's this sort of thing where being like emotional about his family and emphasizing how he's doing it all for them and everything looks very good for the jury, and he knows that. But it doesn't make it not true. It's another it's the flip side where doing what comes naturally becomes the good strategy. You know, because he comes across as authentic and sincere in a way that counterpoints against Spencer very clearly in terms of how everyone's perceiving them anyway.
Yep.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I made a promise that we wouldn't take more than 2 hours.
Well, we didn't actually start until 8:40.
Right. So we have 6 minutes.
All right. Well,
everything up.
Okay, so we'll try to go through it quickly then. So
yeah, I mean, it's just there's
I felt
you and they are being done without me in a way that makes it clear that I need to be wrapping up.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So in any case, I felt before the final tribal council that I think it was still maybe pretty close between Jeremy and Spencer. Although I think even saying that it was very close was me realizing subconsciously that it wasn't looking as good for Spencer, because, you know, you and I had talked previously about like, well, if Spencer makes it to the end, he's going to win, right? But I think saying that it's really close was recognizing Jeremy's kind of pulling away here.
He really he closed it out so much better, and it was obvious. Yeah.
Well, and then as soon as we get into the tribal council, it was so clear, just like from the get-go, that just everyone was just very few people critical in any way of Jeremy. Not a lot of people talking to Natasha at all, which is, you know, kind of to be expected, but nobody saying anything nice about Spencer at all. And it was just like, oh, yeah, this is not going well. And I think he recognized very quickly, too, that it was not going well, because he completely had to change his approach, which unfortunately left him in the position of being in a unfamiliar approach that he wasn't as comfortable with and didn't like as much. You know, and so he kind of just wasn't able to pull that off nearly as well, and it was kind of too late at any rate. It was a surprisingly kind of bland final tribal council, honestly. I thought there really weren't hardly any fireworks. I mean, almost the biggest one was Kimmy saying, "Jeremy, how could you do this to me?" And he kind of just like, I only voted for you because you betrayed me.
Yeah. When
I was defending you against them until it was proven. And then, yeah, I turned on you after you turned on me. So, and then she's like, oh, yeah, I guess so. I guess you're right. Because what else is he going to say? I mean, that's really hard. You can't argue that. So in any case, everyone's really mad at Spencer. Yeah, I don't know, especially since we're trying to wrap things up. I don't have a lot else of other notes except being amused that right at the end of the final tribal council, we have Cass saying, Probst walks away with the votes, and Cass says, I hope he gets on a jet ski.
Yeah.
So sure enough, the votes turned out to be unanimous. Kind of incredible, especially just in the sense this is one of the biggest juries that there's ever had. So to getting unanimous on the biggest jury, all the more impressive.
Yep.
Jeremy proved himself a great player. He did a great job. Deserved to win 100%.
He did. And then in the recap episode, I mean, it was interesting and all, but there was nothing that, other than Terry's son being okay, like that was all great news. But the rest of it was people like Joe.
Yeah.
You did this.
I did like one exchange that it was easy to miss, but when Abby, they were saying, well, how do you feel about how, you were perceived, Abby? And she's like, I'm my own worst enemy. And then Cass kind of goes, you're your own best friend too.
Yes, that one was good.
That was a good line.
I think the most
but
the most interesting thing from it, not that it wasn't interesting when you've been following the season, it was sort of a nice recap, but there was nothing to be gleaned from it. Like they didn't even do the simple like, hey, if Spencer had won and gotten rid of Jeremy and it had been Spencer, Kelly, and so-and-so in the final,
Natasha,
and Tasha, who would you have voted for? Would you have voted for Spencer? They didn't even do that. It was very much like, here are these people, they're interesting, you like them, let's talk about them.
Yeah. At least unlike the last season, they didn't spend half the reunion show talking to like random audience members. Like that was tiresome last time. The only other thing that we had really was that they announced the next season is going to be another Brains Brawn Beauty thing, and apparently lots of people get hurt and sick and stuff.
Yes.
I can't help but think that it seems like a lot of the clips that they showed of that is like spoilers of who it is that's going to happen.
They made it kind of seem like that, but it came so fast that I don't even remember. So
I don't know who any of these people are yet. So it's and the only other additional just interesting wrinkle that's not necessarily relevant other than being interesting is something we've commented on a previous episode, which is technically the next season that they're going to show was actually filmed before the one that we just watched, which is not how they typically do that.
Yep. So we'll see if that has any play on the final votes or anything. But
yeah. All right. So in any case, we're wrapping it up. Thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching. It was a great season, and we hope you've enjoyed listening and or watching to us, too.
I always do the okay at the end, but you can do the Jeremy. Yeah. So
nice.
All right. We'll talk to you Saturday.
Night.